And in the season finale, Leanne is upstairs with Jericho when this woman shows up at the door, and Leanne looks terrified. She introduces herself to Sean as Aunt Josephine, saying that she's brought a Betamax player for Leanne. And when Sean asks, where's George and May in all of this, she says they're no longer involved. Now, Dorothy heard the knock at the door, so she comes down to investigate and sees Aunt Josephine sitting there. And after Aunt Josephine introduces herself, Dorothy asks her, where's Jericho? Have you done something to him? Josephine kind of laughs that off, saying no. But then she apologizes to Dorothy, saying that she was never supposed to be involved in all of this. She also adds that she understands how much Dorothy has done to try to get Jericho back, but it's time to end this. She then asks for a chance to see Leanne, but Dorothy is in denial about everything she's just heard, and she definitely doesn't want this woman seeing Leanne. Sean, however, kind of convinces Dorothy to let Josephine see Leanne because Josephine's, quote, there to help. So under the pressure, Dorothy agrees to let Josephine see Leanne for 15 minutes, but after that, she wants answers. When Sean goes upstairs, Leanne is standing, clutching a mini statue, ready to hit somebody in the head with it, but it's as if Sean doesn't even notice it. He explains that someone's there to see her, and when Leanne says, well, who is it? Sean explains that it's her Aunt Josephine. And Leanne begs Sean, do not leave me alone with her. But it's kind of too late because Dorothy and Josephine are already headed upstairs. So Leanne and Josephine head up to the attic where Josephine asks, what do you want, Leanne? And Leanne explains, well, I want to stay here with the Turners. But Josephine explains how that isn't an option. She tells Leanne, you know the Turners don't love you. You can't be happy here. This conversation, though, appears pretty one-sided and also pretty quick because Dorothy, who has decided to go into Jericho's room staring at the baby doll, is caught by Aunt Josephine. And Josephine tells Dorothy that her and Leanne are leaving that night, but since she made Dorothy a promise, she plans to keep it. She then hands over the onesie that Leanne found all crumpled up in the basement, telling Dorothy that it's, quote, the truth that she's seeking. Sean, though, is in the room down the hall, and he calls up Julian saying, hey, something's happened, I need you to call me back. But then he notices that Jericho's door is closed, and since he's really concerned about Dorothy harming herself, he starts knocking on it, but Dorothy isn't answering Sean. Dorothy's fine, but she's just looking all over this onesie for a message. So since Sean isn't getting an answer, he walks back to the room where he left his cell phone, but he suddenly can't access it. The passcode that he's using isn't working. And that's when the door suddenly slams shut, and when Sean goes to try to open it up, he can't. He's locked in. So Dorothy is transfixed, and Sean is locked in another room. And at this point, Aunt Josephine has made her way back to the attic, where Leanne has set up the Betamax, and Josephine hands over the tape for her to play. And it's this old tape from probably the late 80s, early 90s, with this guy named Uncle Frederick, who seems to be one of the higher-ups in the Church of the Lesser Saints. And in the video, he's explaining how to return a, quote, lost member. And to do that, it's a 3-step process. The first step is the invocation, where you listen to music that you really like, music that makes you feel, quote, connected to the earth. And as you're doing so, you beat the crap out of yourself. The second step is the consecration. That's where you blind somebody using oils, your hands, a knife, and you stab them, separating the soul from the body. You then heat the blade of a knife, slicing the limbs, and at that point, the soul can be released from the body and be reunited with God. And after that, there's only one more step, the emancipation, and that's just where you burn the body. Uncle Frederick explains to the viewer that while the process is pretty difficult, because the people may have once been family, you should never forget who the real adversary is. Then suddenly, the screen is filled with a bunch of demonic pics, and then the video ends. And as soon as the video is over, Josephine questions Leanne as to why she made the decision to abandon her post and come to the Turner residence. And Leanne tells her it's because Dorothy needed her help. And Josephine asks, well, did you help her? And Leanne emphatically says yes. But Josephine reminds Leanne we are here for one purpose, and that's to serve him. Now, let's see if you can be saved. She starts making Leanne pray to God, but then she tells Leanne to announce to God that she's going to forget Dorothy Turner. When Leanne doesn't want to do that and tries to make a run for it, that's when Josephine grabs some of the oils from the box and throws them on Leanne's eyes, temporarily blinding her. Leanne tries to make it downstairs to the kitchen where she starts feeling around for a knife, and she is able to find one, but over in the corner, Josephine is stabbing herself in the leg, as Tutti Frutti is playing in the background because that's the first step. So Leanne is scared, temporarily blinded, and she knows she needs to get the hell away from Josephine, so she goes into the basement, using the sink down there to try to wash away whatever has blinded her. Now, upstairs, Sean is trying like hell to yell for Dorothy, but Dorothy's in this trance-like state. He decides that he's going to climb out the window because the door is locked, but right before he does it, he turns and notices that the door is suddenly opened. So he walks back to Jericho's room and demands that Dorothy open the door, but after smelling the onesie, she got a creepy feeling, and she's hooked up a noose. It's Sean's worst nightmare. She tells Sean how she's not opening the door because they've killed him. She's just gotten horrible feelings, and she knows that that's the case. Sean begs her to open up the door so they can figure this thing out, but she tells him, I need to be with him, Sean. I'm sorry, Sean. I don't mean to hurt you, and I hope you can forgive me. But he screams, I'm never going to forgive you for this. But Dorothy seems to have made up her mind, telling him, I'm sorry. I've made the decision. Sean, though, continues to try to talk Dorothy off the ledge, but down in his basement, he's completely unaware of what's going on. Josephine has made her way somehow inside, even though Leanne had locked the door, and Leanne is crouched under the steps, hiding as Josephine starts to light a fire for the final step. Leanne tries to make a break for it, but Josephine grabs her, stabbing her with the knife and then cutting her arm. Leanne is only saved when Dorothy actually smashes Josephine in the head with a shovel, knocking her out. Dorothy seems pretty surprised about what she found in her basement, and she checks on Leanne, who assures her, I'm okay. Dorothy starts to call for Sean, but Sean can't hear her, so she says, I'm going to go get Sean. But right before she heads up, Leanne tells her, Josephine wanted you to think that Jericho was gone, but he's not, and I'm going to bring him back to you. And Dorothy is elated at this news, but she heads up to grab Sean. When she does that, Leanne turns to Josephine's knocked out body and says, see, she protected me like I'm her daughter. She then grabs the knife and walks over to the fire to start heating up the blade, but then she's suddenly grabbed by Josephine again. Josephine starts choking her, and she only stops when Leanne is able to get the shroud off of her head. And when Josephine grabs the shroud to put it back on, Leanne, who is freed up at this point, says, vanity is a sin, and then stabs her. Leanne and Josephine suddenly disappear. I mean, by the time that Dorothy gets back downstairs with Sean, which, by the way, didn't take all that long, the fire is out and the two are gone. And Dorothy, who had told Sean about the fact that Leanne told him that she was bringing back Jericho, knows how this all looks. So she starts swearing to Sean that she wasn't making all of this up. The two start looking all over the house for Leanne or Josephine, but they can't find either of them. And Dorothy is convinced that Leanne simply went to go grab Jericho. But Sean doesn't believe that's the case. He starts to tell Dorothy what really happened to Jericho last August, but Dorothy is so preoccupied by putting batteries in the baby monitor that she just tells Sean to shut up, and then she turns it on. And when she does that, you can faintly hear somebody that sounds a lot like Leanne in the background. And Sean is convinced that they're simply picking up another person's baby monitor, but the two walk over to Jericho's nursery, and when they open the door, Leanne is standing there with a baby. She's standing there with Jericho. She hands over Jericho to Dorothy and says, we're going to be a family now. And then she lets the Turners have their time with their baby. She then heads to her room where she's talking to herself, saying, I don't know why I keep doing bad things. Honestly, I scare myself sometimes. I can feel the dark thing in me getting bigger. And after she says that, the power goes out on the entire block. But when the lights go out, she is unfazed, just sitting in the dark, saying, I'm tired of everybody telling me what's wrong with me. Maybe nothing's wrong with me. Maybe this is just who I am. But I know how this works. I know they're coming for me, but don't worry, I'll be ready, because I know killing you started a war. And it turns out that Leanne isn't actually talking to herself. She's talking to the charred body of Josephine that she's stuck in the wall. And that is how Season 2 of Servant ends. Thank you so much for watching this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you liked it, thumbs down if you don't. You all know to do that. Be nice in the comments section. Do not be a jerk. If you don't like the video, just keep moving. And check out my podcast, Scene Invaders, for my thoughts on actual, things.